situational depression is motivated by pain, and left untreated, pain left untreated will turn to depression and that feeling of hopelessness. Now, clinical depression is something else. Clinical depression is about brain chemistry, and that the brain of a depressed person that has clinical depression is different. It's like the difference between a brain of an addict. The brain of an addict is much different from that of a normal person. So clinical depression, it is severe. It can be very, very painful. It can be life-threatening, and that many people do commit suicide during those dark days. Now, the good news is there is recovery for both sides, whether it's clinical depression or situational depression. And, we're in good company if you do suffer from depression. A lot of famous people have suffered from depression. Abraham Lincoln is one of the prime ones. I mean, on his wedding day, he was a young man. He talked about the depression, and he went through his lifetime being depressed. And there wasn't anything available at that time, I don't believe, to ease his pain. And then our founder of Alcoholics Anonymous, Bill W. Bill W. had what we call a flash of light spiritual experience, which very, very few addicts have. It's described to be, like Paul Saul when he was on Damascus Road. Saul was a mean man. He was awful. He was a tax collector. He was violent. He was all of that and plus. And on that road to Damascus, he had what we call a spiritual experience. God intervened in his life, and he was a changed man. Even his name was changed from Saul to Paul. So that is what happened to Bill W. Bill W. had what we call a spiritual experience. And that when he came out of that, it was his last detox, last time in the hospital for being detoxed from alcoholism. And when he came out of that, he knew that he was different, and he never wanted to drink again. But 16 years sober in Alcoholics Anonymous, he suffered depression, and he had suffered depression all of his life, even before sobriety. He was suffering depression at the point that he didn't want to drink, but he didn't want to live. And he wrote a letter, and it's entitled Depression. It's a 3-page letter. And if you go on aa.org and just put in the paper on depression, you'll find a copy there. But Bill has given us a lot of information about depression that is helpful for anyone, whether they're an addict or not, but particularly for addicts, for alcoholics. Being in the field, we have never known which comes first, the chicken or the egg. Does depression come before the addiction, or does it come after the addiction? It's both. It's both ways. I've never known of an addict yet that I've known that I've or I've known through personal. I don't know of anyone that has found their way to addiction without depression and pain. So to say this, that depression, whether it's clinical or situational, both are motivated by pain. Now, if we don't address the pain, like I said, it will turn to depression and then that feeling of hopelessness. And when we get there, now, when people come through treatment, what I've always been, have worked with the staff to encourage the staff to let people sit in their feelings. When they get to that place of pain, what I call the dark night of the soul. If people don't go through that dark night of the soul and get on the other side, they will not want recovery. If something intervenes, if they pick up a drink, or if people come in and try to, now I'm not saying don't love. Sometimes we can love people too much when they're in that dark place. It's about being with them, staying with them, encouraging them, but don't interfere in their process. If we don't go through that dark night of the soul, get through it, and ask for help, we'll stay in it. And so, this is, and I will tell you, hands down, the only solution for depression, for pain, is greater than yourself. That's the only solution. We have treated many religious people. And, I'm religious in that I'm a religious person, that I go to church. I do not go to church to treat my addictions or to treat depression. I go to church to be with other fellow believers, and I go and I worship own understanding. Now, I go to 12-step programs to treat my addictions, and I'm very careful not to mix the two. Because, when I go to church, it's not appropriate for me to go there and raise my hand and say, I want to talk about how depressed I was last night. Now, sometimes, it probably would be better if we could do that in church. But the thing about it, we must get with people of like kind who have gone through the depths of our mental illness. We must get around people who understand. And I think we need both. I think we need people who have been there, and then we need professionals. Not all professionals have to be suffering from, addictions or mental illness, but we have to get with people who understand and who can offer us some good treatment. Actually, what Bill W. wrote about. Now, that has been many years ago, and we didn't carry forth with that. I've never heard of codependency talked about in Alcoholics Anonymous. But the letter that Bill W. wrote, I want to just read you one thing. He said what he learned was, he said, suddenly I realized what the matter was. My basic flaw has always been dependence. Absolute dependence on people or circumstances to supply me with prestige, security, and romance. And that describes codependency, is getting our good feelings outside ourselves. And that's what basically is the core of what we treat at Shades of Hope, is codependency. Yes, most of our clients come here with addiction, but getting sober, getting clean from addiction just gets you to the starting gate to actually work on those underlying causes and conditions. My mother suffered from depression. I never knew my mother that she wasn't depressed. And I could tell her story better than I could tell mine. She told it on a daily basis. And I will give her credit. She had a horrendous childhood, a bad childhood, and I could tell you all about it. She had every reason to be depressed, every reason. And, when I was about 5 years old, we lived in East Texas. I was always right by my mother's side, and I went to the doctor with her and my dad. And what my mother was suffering from was depression. Now, they called it nerves. She had a bad nervous breakdown. But I remember that doctor put her on Miltowns, which was the first tranquilizer. And from that point on, my mother died at age 83. And she took very few sober breaths from those early days of Miltowns until she died. A lot of times addiction is a disease that won't let you die, but it won't let you live. My mother existed, and how she lived is I put her in treatment 13 different times. And they would get her sober, they'd get her cleaned up. She'd drink alcohol, which is a depressive. It's not anybody's upper. She'd drink alcohol, and it kind of lifts you up for 18 minutes, but it drops you down. And the types of pills that she was prescribed were theirs. And so it did nothing but add to the depressions. Now, when I first went into the field, having the history of my mother, I was totally against medication. I was one of these hardcore addiction therapists that no one needed medication. And we didn't have that types of medication back when my mother was suffering so much that we have now. Now, I'm not a doctor and I don't prescribe medication, but I will tell you there's some medication on the market today that's designed strictly for depression, for that brain chemistry. And all those types, it's SSRIs, those types of medication, all they do is bring people up to baseline. They don't jack you up or put you down. They bring it up to baseline. People who are clinically depressed, what I recommend is go to a psychiatrist. Now, your general practitioner, they can prescribe meds. I would go to your general practitioner and get them to refer you to a psychiatrist, someone that understands the medication and the different types of medication. So, that's my talk on medication. Medication, I think, can be very helpful for clinically depressed people because that's about brain chemistry. And I'm embarrassed to say when Prozac first came out, and I have a lot of shame about this, but it was in the 80s and I was, in the field and all. And like I said, very much against medication. And I would go around and say, well, no one has a Prozac deficiency. Well, that was ignorance on my part. I didn't know what Prozac or that type of medication, how that can help the brain of a clinically depressed person. So I will say, oh God, I have broadened, I did understand, I studied, and I have watched people be able to live a full life and have the addition of some medication. Now, medication alone is not the ticket. I think medication with good therapy. And what I mean by good therapy, I think it's important to start off with talk therapy. Everyone needs to get their story straight. You need to talk about the problem. You need to share it at a deep level. Nothing will change. There's got to be some action taken. What we believe in here at Shades, Tia Melody, who wrote the book Facing Codependence, is the one that has really, out of her own depression, and she really thought that she was a bad alcoholic and probably did, kind of like me. Shades trained with Pia. What Pia gave us is for depression, whether it's situational, but particularly clinical depression, usually there is a root cause. And that root cause usually comes from childhood. Now, children, a day in the life of a child is much different than a day in a life of an adult. Children have sensitive little hearts, and things can be said or done to a child that goes to their sensitive heart, and they can carry that the rest of their. What happens with that? Sometimes, the brain accommodates the mind, and sometimes those people will break down in clinical depression. Some of them will have situational depression, and some of them, if they have the brain chemistry, if they start using a substance, oh, well, they have found the solution. If you have a brain that when you drink the drug alcohol or take a pill or use food like I did, it changes the way you feel. It makes you feel better if you have the brain of an addict. That's what I say, why I say addicts are not idiots. If we didn't get something out of using a substance or a behavior, we would give it up in a heartbeat. We'd do it a couple of times and think, oh, well, that doesn't work either. And we'd go on down the road. Addictions work until the solution becomes the problem. And I have never, ever had a client seek treatment to say, well, I was sitting around the other day and I thought, well, I just want to go to Shades of Hope. The only reason people ever seek help is the pain. Pain is the motivator for people to seek help. Now, I want to talk a little bit about grief. And like I said, grief goes right along. I mean, depression. The other day I went through the grief process. And the grief process is very simple. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross gave us that. I'm going to give me a drink of water. Stages of grief. And if people will go through those stages of grief and get help, I don't think we can go through them by ourselves. I think we need help. But the stages of grief, the first stage is denial that someone died, denial that our country is in the state of affairs it is, deny 9/11, deny. We don't want to face the reality of what's happening. Once we get past the denial, I remember when my husband was dying, I was in denial that he was that sick, and I let my children call in hospice, and I thought to myself, and I'd go in and talk to him, and he was unconscious, but I'd go in and talk to him, and I'd say, honey, I'm just going to let the girls do what they want to do, but you and I know that you're going to be all right. That's denial. I didn't want him to die, and he did. So denial is the first step of the grief process. And so once we get past denial, then we get angry. Next step is bargaining. We want to bargain it away. God, lift this from me. Do not let this happen. We beg God, please let me pass over. Do not let me have to go through this, whatever I'm going through. That's bargaining. With food addicts, we bargain with the food. I mean, for a food addict, they know when they're in trouble, because when they're in trouble in the plate, when the food is calling them, when the food is bargaining with them, they're in trouble. It's never about the food. It's always an inside job. And with alcoholics, when they're wanting to use alcohol or drugs, it's never about the drug or the alcohol. It's what's going on the inside. And so bargaining, we bargain with God. And then if we don't get our way there, then it turns to anger. We get so angry. We get angry at the disease. We get angry for the person dying. If they were in an accident, we get angry at the person that was involved in the accident. And all of that is real. All of that is real. You're not denying it. You have every right to be angry. My husband died of Alzheimer's, but I got angry at the disease of Alzheimer's and that there was no cure for it or no treatment at that time. So anger is that is a good motivator. And if you'll take the anger, what it will do is to push you into the pain. And if we don't feel the pain, we will not get through the grief process. And so what I talked about a while ago, the pain is going through the dark night of the soul, is feeling that deep down, hardcore pain of losing a person that you love dearly, losing, your life through sobriety, through addictions, whatever the pain is. If it's your pain, it's real. Do not deny the pain. It is real. And you might think, well, my problem is not as bad as their problem. If it's a problem for you, it's real, and it needs to be addressed, and you have every right to the pain. And for addicts, we don't like pain, and that's why we would use, because it would ease the pain of living. But if you can sit with the pain, it hurts bad. And then that next step is like, okay, God, I surrender. I give up. I surrender. And that is the most freeing feeling, to give it up. And once we surrender, what we get to is that stage of acceptance. When we get to the state of the stage of acceptance, we won't like what's happened. I don't like that my mother never sobered up. I don't like that my husband died of Alzheimer's. I don't like this, that. But when I can accept it for the reality that it is, then that creates an opening where God can work in my life. Otherwise, I'm running the show. I'm holding on to the pain. I'm holding on to the resentment. I'm holding on to the denial. I'm running the show. When I can surrender that pain and surrender it to God, that creates an opening for Him to come in and work. Now, the God of my understanding is a gentleman. He does not force his way in where he's not invited. And I believe that God can heal any area of our lives that we're willing to surrender to Him. Now, those of you that have clinical depression, don't go out and say, well, I heard Tennie say that God can heal my clinical depression and I need to get off my meds. You know, I believe that God works with people. I think He works with the people. I think God lives and works through people. And, you know, I think God is powerful enough to zap us well. But most of the time, we do the footwork, He blesses the effort. We do the footwork, and He blesses the effort. So, clinical depression is about brain chemistry. You're not going to get over it, I don't believe. I've never seen anyone, I've people treated and live a full life. But I believe it takes treatment. I believe it takes getting to those core symptoms, and I think it takes the type of therapy. We're not the only treatment center that does it. There are others, but they are few. They are few. Talk therapy is good, but I believe we need to get down into the causes and conditions and do the core anger work, the release work. And once we do that and can get clear of the past, get clear of our childhood, whatever that is, then we can be present for the present today. And, you know, like I said, with good medication and good therapy, and I'm saying good therapy. There are some countries, and I was reading this the other day, that have socialized medicine. And the mental health is way down the list. I was reading this in some countries, it takes years to get an appointment with a mental health counselor. We're fortunate in the United States that we're not there yet, and I hope we never get to socialized medicine, but that's political, and this is not a political talk, whatever. But, you know, my belief is mental health needs to be addressed as much, if not more, than physical health. Because if mental health is not addressed, the body accommodates the mind. When there's mental illness, mental health problems, the body will begin to break down in stress-related illnesses. So both have got to be addressed, the physical side and the mental and emotional side. But for most of us, it lies in the mental and emotional side. And so I'm saying clinical depression absolutely can be treated. Left untreated, I've seen people kill themselves. I mean, people that had everything in the world to live for. But the pain of that depression got so great that they have killed themselves. Now, you know, when we have talked to the family or whatever, what we find out is they quit reaching out. A lot of times they quit taking their meds because most people don't like to take meds when they're depressed. And when they get to feeling better, they'll get off of them. They quit reaching out to a therapist. They quit going to a 12-step program. 12-step programs work, folks, and they are all over. I mean, they have 12-step programs for grief, for depression. Any problem you have, there really is a 12-step program for it. All you have to do is go online and look for them. But to get with, and if there's not a 12-step program, get in a grief group. One of the main things is to share the pain and to mourn, do your crying. The Wailing Wall, I've never been there, but I hear that people go there and pray. They take their prayers there and they wail, they cry. That's what grief is. That's what mourning is. You know, there's some people that think that they need to just be, I think of the Kennedys, when the death of President Kennedy, and what the family was so complimented on was how all of them just stayed so into, you know, just very reserved, and they were complimented for that. They needed to cry. They needed to show their feelings. They gave, you know, they could have helped a whole nation learn how to go through grief and pain. I'm not judging them, but it's, you know, pain needs to be shared and it needs to be mourned with other people. Those tears need to come up. I don't believe we can do it by ourselves. And so, through pain, wonderful things can happen. I always talk about an oyster. An oyster gets a grain of salt underneath that shell, and it's an irritant, and it irritates that oyster. And it just grinds and grinds and grinds, and it hurts. And I bet that oyster is just cussing and wanting, a pain pill or something. But what pops out of that grain of sand is a beautiful pearl. That's what pain does. Out of the pain comes something beautiful. We have oak trees around here everywhere. They are hard. We have West Texas wind, and these oak trees are stiff and they are hard, and they can take the wind. And they're kind of like the Kennedys. You watch a willow tree and bamboo, they weave and flow. And I think that's what going through grief is. We begin to weave and flow. We kind of go with it. We don't stay stuck and stiff in it. We go with the flow, and we get with other people, and we share our pain. When you share pain, it is cut in half. When we share a joy, it's doubled. So sharing is probably one of the best things to treating depression. Now, pain we're going to grow through. We're going to grow through the pain. You stay with the pain, you get some good help, you are going to get better. You're not going to die of depression if you get help and you go through the pain. But what happens if we don't stay and go through the pain, that pain can turn to self-pity. Self-pity kills us. Self-pity is poor me, poor me, poor me, this shouldn't have happened. A lot of things happen to people that shouldn't happen to a dog, let alone a human being. Stuff happens to us, but there's a way to get through it. Self-pity is poor me, pour me another drink, or pour me another milkshake. Ease my pain. And when you ease the pain, you're going to get sicker. When you want to get healthy, you go through the pain, but you don't ever have to go through it alone. You do not have to go through it alone. Get with other people. And either in a grief group, a group in your church. There's some wonderful groups in Houston. I've got some friends from the Life, what's the name of that church? Life Church. They have a wonderful group there. Get with other people who are going through the same thing that you're going through, and share your pain, and it will be halved. So, but remember, self-pity kills us. Now, my daughter Kim she's always my backup. She is my co-therapist, and we do intensive once a month. And she's back there, she just sent me a note. She said, "Mother, tell them you don't go through the grief process just once." That's true. We go through it one time, and then all of a sudden with that, oh, well, I'm better. And then a few days, up will pop the anger, or up will pop the denial. That is what going through the grief process is. Knowing what those stages are and recognize them, and knowing you don't have to stay there. So thanks, Kim. Yeah, she's the second half of my brain. And so those stages, we're going to go through those stages. But always remember, there is a surrender. If you're willing to surrender and get help, there's an acceptance, and that creates an opening for God to come in. And I will tell you, God is the answer. Spirituality is the answer. There is no other. Now, like I said, God has given us a lot of healthy people, in the field of addiction and mental health, and some good medication. So there's no need to continue the path of unresolved grief or unresolved pain and anger. So that is what I have to share, and thank you for listening, and let's open it up. If you have any questions or comments, I'm certainly open to listening, and I could probably hear from you, learn from each of you. So let's open it up, Kim. You want to have a question or a comment? Because we've got some people here that have walked through a lot.
I had a comment, if it's all right. I'm off depression meds. I'm so happy to say I was clinically depressed and on meds for decades. I went through shades and got rid of my poor coping skills of smoking pot and eating disorder. Worked through the shame core and resolved those issues, made peace with my past, rediscovered the God of my understanding. And I don't know, 6-8 months after I got home from Shades, I was working with a therapist, and I was at a place where I really just wasn't feeling like the meds weren't working anymore. I don't know. Anyway, try and wean me off of them, and we did, and I've been off of them for over 2 years now. And I have some gloomy days, but I have tools now to deal with that darkness when it comes, and to get out of it before it escalates into me being in bed for days or other depression symptoms. So I just wanted to share some hope for clinically depressed. I had a litany of psych diagnoses, and through the grace of God and making peace with my past and being actively in recovery, I don't need those medications anymore, and I am eternally grateful, not only to Shades, but to the God of my understanding. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Anne. That is wonderful. And what I heard you say, you did that with the help of a therapist, that you didn't just take yourself off of it. And I've known many people that are clinically depressed that have been able to get off of their meds, because once you have the tools, pick up that tool bag and we get to use them every day. Thank you for sharing, because people do need to hear that there is hope, and it takes work, and you have put in the effort and the hard work, and thanks for sharing it.
Tennie, thank you so much for this, and what you said is so true, that you can think you're finished with the grieving process and then it hits you again, and you go through it again when you've had a loss. And when I lost Daniel, I know I went to a grief group. I had friends that had walked the road ahead of me, and we got together and talked, and it made a huge difference. And I thought I was doing really good. And one night I had been studying, and I needed some stuff out of the bottom drawer of the desk, because I was trying to balance our checkbook and do things that Daniel had always done. And I couldn't get the drawer open. And I tried and tried. And finally, I just stepped back and I kicked the desk as hard as I could. And I said, "Thanks a lot, Daniel. Thanks. Thanks a lot for leaving me with all of this. Thanks a lot, Daniel." I was so much anger just poured out. And then, of course, I felt so bad that I had spoken like that to Daniel, who couldn't hear anyway. But I know that there was a time that I released a lot of sorrow, and I allowed God to really pour healing oil in on me. And I did not realize how effective it was. But a couple of weeks later, I went on a trip with my parents and my children to Europe, and we were gone for about 2 weeks. And when we came home, I realized that I had not cried all the way home. Because before that, the 2.5 years before that, if I would go out of town, I would start crying. The day before I got home, started to leave, I would cry all the way home. It was just that awareness that he's not going to be there. I'm going home and he's not there. Things are different. And we flew home and I got settled back in, got the kids started to school, and I realized I have not been crying. And I knew that I had reached another level in the process. That you have to walk through every bit of the process.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And you're absolutely right. And it comes in waves. And I love that you got angry. And on a certain level, he probably knew it, and he was all right about it. He was probably laughing at you, you know. But, you know, I can, and it was interesting about out of town. I used to travel a lot with business, you know, I'm speaking and all. And when I, you know, the first thing I do when I get to a hotel is call Ariel and my husband, and I would call him 2-3 times during the day, and he would call me. And we actually, my business partner said, y'all spend more time talking when you're out of town than you do when you're in town. And so even today, when I go out of town, there is a sadness, and I want to reach the phone for the phone and pick it up and call my husband. And, you know, but I'm able to voice it to whoever I'm traveling with, and just to feel the loss and just the pain of just missing him, you know. So thank you so much, Jan, for sharing. And anyone else?
Yeah, I do, Tennie.
Okay.
So, you know, you've talked about like the stages of grief, and like I'm honestly kind of going through that because like my grandmother right now is going through something. She has dementia, lives in another country, and I can't really see her because of the whole COVID thing. So when it comes to anger, I know that you teach at Shades that there's also like the healthy anger, that it leads to motivation. Like, how does that play in the grief process?
Okay, yes, healthy anger. I mean, it's okay to be angry. It's what we do with the anger that makes it sick.
Right.
I was raised in a household of very sick people. You know, my mother, how she dealt with problems, she took drugs and alcohol and laid on the couch and was sick. My dad was a rager, and he was violent. He was a very violent man. And so I got both sides of that, self-pity from mother and then rage from my father. Now, I did not know how to take a problem to the resolution stage, and how I learned how to deal with problems is through the 12-step program. That didn't help me too much with my rage, because I would have that emotional build up, and then I'd blow up. And the things that I'd blow up about, I mean, I was justified. Those people shouldn't have done that, you know. But nothing justifies the type of rage that I had. And so what we teach at Shades is confrontation and how to confront people if you're angry with them. But get the feelings, get that anger out before you go to the person. And how you do that is you call someone else. You call a sponsor, you call a friend, and you just blah, 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 and you know, have that anger, spurt of anger with someone that is neutral. And then you can go back and confront the person that you're angry at. And like I said, anger is healthy. It's what we get, you know, what we do with it. Anger gives us strength, energy, and motivation. It helps us, healthy helps us to bring about change. And rage is about, it's almost a drug. I would get drunk on the rage. I would rage and rage and rage, and then I'd see all those bodies around me, and usually it was my children. You know, a rager puts it on the ones that we love the most. And also in the early days of me owning a business, I was very abusive to my staff. Thank God they stayed with me. I don't do that today. I do not do that. God has removed that rage. Can I get angry? Very seldom I do, but when I do, I can be appropriate with it, and I can be and do a confrontation. And a confrontation is, you know, when you, you know, when you describe the behavior, and then say what you think about the situation. For instance, I'm going to I'll use Misty for an example. She's sitting here. I'm going to do confrontations of Misty to show you what a confrontation is. Okay, I'm going to use Kim because she said I could use her. When I see you working too hard and getting too tired, what I think about that is that you're not taking care of yourself. And how I feel is some pain. And what I would need or like for you to do is to look at how hard you're working and get some rest. And what I intend to do is to find something for us to, what I intend to do is to set a boundary and invite you to go do something fun with me. Thank you. You're welcome. That's a confrontation. That's a confrontation. So does that help?
It does. Thank you.
It's okay to angry. It's what we do with it that makes us sick. Now, if we hold the anger in and don't ever say anything, it can eat us up from the inside out. That's what causes stress-related illnesses, ulcers, you name it. And so anger is like acid. It will burn out, eat up the container that is holding it. And so when you're, and, I think that's what we're going to talk about next week is resentment and anger. But it will eat up the container that holds it. So that's why it's important to learn how to express anger in a healthy way. And like Kim said, it does give us strength, energy, and motivation. Anyone else? All right. Any other comments or questions? Or I see some sweet faces out there. Anybody want to comment?
I'll go, Tennie.
Jackie, go.
Well, you said some really great things today, and some of the things that resonated with me, in particularly, are the
around lunch
ability to process the anger. And one of the things you said, which was true for me, was I got drunk on the anger, and typically it was affected towards my kids, and the pain was real, but I just didn't know how to relieve myself of it until I got to Shades. And at Shades, I was taught that I can first process it in a healthy environment, in a safe environment. And a lot of the anger wasn't from the actual instance of what was going on at that moment, but it was childhood trauma that was showing itself in the form of rage. And part of the anger was what I was there for too, the experiences within my family. But what I found is what you said is also true, that the 12 steps work, because every time I share my story at a meeting, I'll do a lot of speaking. When asked, I always do it. And I always feel better. And when you said that sharing cuts it in half, I believe that's 100% true. I think to process it in a healthy way via Shades of Hope was wonderful for me, but to continue to stay healthy, one of the ways is to do the 12 step and to give back to others, and to share my experience, strength, and hope with them. So some of the things that you said really resonated with me, and I really appreciate your Tennie Talk this morning. I've really enjoyed seeing all the sweet faces, and especially David's family, who I feel like I know, but now I get to see their sweet faces and put a face with a name. And really appreciate the topic of the grieving process, because there's so much more to it. And one of the last thing I'm going to touch on is the part that was the most helpful for me was when I was at Shades, and I had the topic that I was given, or that confronted with the injustices within things that happened to my daughter. I remember going back to my room that day, and it brings tears to my eyes when I think of it. But I remember saying, okay, God, I give up. I don't know how to do this anymore on my own. I need your help. And it wasn't until I was able to surrender that pain and give it to my higher power, my God, and say, I need your help. I just can't do this anymore. that I'd never really truly felt release of the pain like I did at that experience and that interchange, and realizing I was no longer in control. That somebody bigger than me, somebody stronger than me, somebody that could feel all the pain. Because out of that grief came the most amazing relationships I could have ever dreamed of, with my children, with my spouse, with my family of choice. And so for that, I'm so deeply grateful. And, I think that the surrender was a key component for me, in recognizing there is a God and I'm not it, and that I can let it go and let God do his work through you as a vehicle, through other people's, other recovery parts are my vehicles. When I go into a room, it's a vehicle for me to let go and let God. So for that, I'm grateful. And with that, I'm done.
Thanks, Jackie. Also, Jackie is helping us. She's is chairman of the alumni, and we have an alumni meeting every Tuesday night at 7. And really, we're opening it up to anyone. It's at 7 o'clock on Tuesday night. Ann chaired it last night. It was a great meeting, and it's about sharing whatever you want to share. And so that is so important. One of the things, when I went to treatment almost 35 years ago for my eating disorder, I had not gone a day without using food since I was 4 years of age. Some way I would use food to ease the pain. So when I got in recovery from my eating disorder and I didn't have anything to ease the pain, that's when the pain began to come up. Now, I knew on a certain level about the sexual abuse of my father, but I'll tell you, I had never addressed it. So I went to a 30-day trauma program down in Florida, and that literally, I believe, both treatments saved my life. Not everyone has to or needs to go to treatment, but those of us who need to, we must. Everything I'm about today has come out of what I have learned from going to treatment for my eating disorder and for the trauma. Then after that, I would do an 8-day, a 6-day. If I did anything I had to do to relieve the pain and the anger and the rage, until I woke up one day and I knew I was done. I was finished. And if that pain ever comes back, I will absolutely put myself into a treatment center or a treatment program somewhere, because I know the help that I've received from those two treatments for, it was two different things, but the trauma, I had to do that because it was the driving force behind everything. So anyone else have anything?
Hey, Tennie, this is Zip.
Oh, hi, Zip.
Hey, I'm with my wife here. We got our video blocked because she's still in her pajamas. So, but yeah, I want to thank you very much. You guys, we're about 5 years in on what we're going through, and there are a couple things that you said that really touched on me. One of the things was sharing the grief process and sharing the pain. If there was one blessing for me that came out of this, is that when during this entire time is when my wife had to go to the well of despair, and just, you have to go there. I was not going through that at the time, and I could hold on to her and allow her to go as deep and as long as she needed to go, and I was able to pull her back out. And the same thing happened with me when I had to go there, and she was not in that same state that I was. She was able to hold on to me and pull me back out when it was time to come out. So neither one of us stayed down in that pit,
Yeah.
But the sharing it and having somebody there who knew what was going on, you can't exchange that for anything.
Yes.
And then the other thing I think that I've learned, at least for me, is I've never found a right way to go through this, but there are 3 wrong ways. And one is to try to hide from it, like you're talking about. You can't hide from it. You don't put a bowl in your head, and you don't put a bottle in your mouth. Apart from that, I think you just go through it as best you can. Put as much of it on God as you can, and go from there. But I want to thank you for allowing us to be a part of this today. This is huge for us.
Yes.
Thanks.
Thanks. One of the things that I missed about the solution is pretty much what you said. In the, everything that we go through, I don't care what it is, whatever we go through, God can use it to help someone else. And so I hope when you're ready that you and your wife can begin to share with other people, other folks that have lost particularly children. I cannot imagine what that would be like. I've gone through a lot of things, but by the grace of God, I've never lost a child. I don't even know how you place that in your brain. And now the thing that you can do is to give that love and support to others. That's really how we get better, when we start helping someone else. And there's someone in this meeting right here today, so by your sharing, that you have helped. And so I hope you'll be on the other meetings. Y'all are open to the meeting on Tuesday night. I hope you'll join us at 7 o'clock. And thank you so much for sharing. Anyone else? Pat, Cam, you tell me how far we need.
I always let the meeting run over, not that Tennie ever runs over. No, always schedule to start a little early, start a little, and stay over a little bit late. But we are coming up on the hour that we do have dedicated to this. I want to thank everybody for attending. We're going to be doing this, like I said, every Wednesday in this format through May, and then going into June, we'll change the format and going to more of a webinar type format. Thank you for being here. Please return next week, same time, same station. And the topic next week is anger versus resentment.
Can I say something?
Yes, please.
We've got some people on this call that has lots of good recovery. They've gone through a lot. They're on the other side. I hope you'll be back and hope you will bring your recovery to this and share, because I'm sitting here looking at somebody that are absolute miracles. I know you when you wasn't. I mean, I saw you at your very depths, and I'm sitting here looking at miracles. And so I hope you'll join us and feel free to share your experience, strength, and hope. People need to hear. People need to hear how you've come through. I mean, we need to share with each other, and just like Jan sharing, and all it. We need, and Jackie, we need you to share the hope and Brother Zip. So hope you'll come back next week, and let's do this again. It's helping me as much as it is all of you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Everybody have a blessed day.
Thank you, Tennie.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
So much.
Bye. Good to see y'all. Hope you'll be back next week.